We are super honored to be here today with Charlene and Ty Bollinger, who are world famous health freedom advocates, health researchers, documentary film producers, and best-selling authors. Now, Charlene and Ty began a quest to learn all they could possibly learn about alternative cancer treatments after losing several family members to cancer, including both Ty's mom and dad. What we love about them is that they refused to accept the notion that chemotherapy, radiation, and surgery were the most effective treatments available for cancer patients. So Ty and Charlene found ample evidence to support the fact and to support the allegation that the war on cancer is largely a fraud, and that there's large multinational pharmaceutical companies around the world that are actually running the show. They're the founders of The Truth About Cancer, a docuseries, and they've also produced several other documentary miniseries, including The Quest for the Cures, The Quest for the Cures Continues, The Truth About Detox, The Truth About Vaccines, and The Truth About Pet Cancer. In total, their documentaries, films have been viewed by over 20 million people around the world. So thank you so much for being here with us today, guys. We really appreciate your presence.
Yeah, Cyrus, Robbie, glad to be on the show with you guys today. We're honored.
Yes, we are. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. So, even though you guys are experts on cancer, the reason that we wanted to interview you in the 2019 Mastering Diabetes Online Summit is twofold. Number one, because in much the same way that you guys have uncovered the truth for people living with cancer, people living with diabetes around the world have also been grossly misled by the pharmaceutical industry for over 100 years about what are the actual causes of diabetes and what you can do to truly reverse diabetes and become free of medication for the rest of your life. And then number two, that diabetes and cancer actually have a very strong connection. And that there's a lot of evidence-based research, which we can talk about today, that shows that those living with insulin resistance and diabetes are actually at a significantly increased risk for the development of many forms of cancer. So before we get too far into things, let's start at the top. And how about you guys tell us your personal stories? Tell us, what got you interested in spreading the word about cancer to the rest of the world in the first place?
Yeah, great question. I'll let Charlene hit that one because she tells it a lot better than I do.
He's so sweet, isn't he? Well, the story really starts when we were children, at least for me. When I was a little girl, I was dreaming about my knight in shining armor, my prince. And I knew that he would come one day and rescue me and slay all my dragons, and we would live happily ever after together. And so the day came when I watched the movie Braveheart at the theater. And when I saw that movie, and this was after growing up, realizing most of the men I was meeting were frogs. They were not princes. And I was giving up on that dream. But I watched the movie Braveheart and knew that I had a Braveheart in this world. And about 2 weeks after watching that movie was when I met this guy. And so we went out on our first date. And when we went out, I just had such a good time. And he said, I don't mean to scare you, but I think I'm falling in love with you. And that was like, wow, okay. But 3 nights later, I said it back.
Hey, don't judge. I'd known her for at least 24 hours at that point.
He did.
No judgment on my end. I know exactly how this goes.
Clearly a very smart guy here.
Yeah. So I had the ring on my hand. After a few days, it took to fit on my, they had to make it smaller. 9 days after that first date, we were engaged officially. And within 6 months, we were married. We were living the dream. I was so happy. And I knew that we had great things that we would do together. I had no idea what they were. I just knew we were going to live happily ever after. But 6 months into this beautiful marriage and life was when Ty's father, he was my father-in-law, he was diagnosed with cancer. They cut his stomach out, and 25 days later, he died. They botched the surgery, and he bled to death. But back then, we thought it was the cancer that took his life. That's what the doctor said. We didn't know anything. We were living in the dark. We were living in this matrix that we are steeped in, just darkness with no answers, chemo, radiation, surgery. The surgery was what took his life. But again, we thought it was cancer. Fast forward to about 6 months, we lost his father's father with cancer. Then a year, his father's brother and his cousin, Glenn, cancer. And then a couple years later, his mother's mother, then his mother's father. And in 2004, his precious, my mother, my best friend outside of Ty, my mother-in-law. That was the straw that broke the camel's back. we knew we had to get the truth that we had been researching all those years out into the world to save lives. So we worked on a book called Cancer Step Outside the Box. We self-published, and it was published in 2006. And with that book, we were able to reach hundreds of thousands of people, and it was a real blessing. But we knew we had to reach the rest of the world. So we started producing documentaries, and now we've reached millions, and we still have the big B, billions. We're going to continue this work so that people don't have to die just because they don't know the truth about cancer. So we'll continue to do whatever we can to reach the world with this beautiful message of life. And the sky's the limit. And we're just so grateful to be here with you, because we know you're really in line with what we're doing, and you're reaching the world too and helping to save lives.
Yeah, it's a really powerful story what you guys have done to take that adversity and turn it around to now go and help, millions of people. It's very, very inspiring. So one of the first questions we have here is, why are doctors not aware of cancer treatments that actually work? And why do many oncologists use chemotherapy as a first line of defense rather than using lifestyle medicine?
That's a loaded question, huh?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's one of the most common questions that we get is, if all this stuff's true, if you can actually reverse cancer naturally, why does my doctor not know? And the long and the short of it is, we could go into great detail in this, and we do in our documentaries. The education at the medical schools was co-opted about 108 years ago in 1910 with the Flexner Report. And as a result of the Flexner Report, which basically eliminated the competition of the drug companies in medical school. In other words, the Flexner Report was funded by the Rockefellers and the Carnegies, and the predetermined conclusion was to determine that the only medical schools in the United States that were teaching sound medicine were the ones that were using drugs. And the ones that were using the natural methods, the herbalism and the naturopathy and the chiropractic and so forth, they were teaching quackery, so they fell by the wayside. They did not receive the funding. So by default, 100 plus years later, after the Flexner Report of 1910, the only medical schools that are left are the ones that are pushing drugs. They're teaching doctors to treat symptoms with drugs, but they're never really teaching them how to get to the root cause of disease, because there's not money in that. In essence, what the medical school curriculum being co-opted has assured that the doctors are the legal drug pushers for the pharmaceutical companies.
And the textbooks have been written by Big Pharma. So back then it was owned by the Rockefellers. They had the chemical companies. Same thing, Big Pharma. Today they're called pharmaceutical companies. So it was for profit that this co-opting and hijacking happened. And there is a lot of profit. And it's not that the doctors, and we really find it crucial to help people to understand that, because unless they understand that very question that you're asking, why don't all doctors know this if this is the case? We have to educate people on the medical system and why it is what it is in order for them to get past that stumbling block. And doctors also have to understand that. Most doctors we know are very good people, and they've gotten into this to save lives. And we know people that are really hitting a roadblock and banging their heads on the wall, doctors, because they don't know what to do. They've not been educated about the holistic, complete approach to the body and the spirit.
Yeah.
They just chop it off if it's a problem, just cut it right off. And the stomach that Ty's father lost, it killed him.
Yeah, and same thing happened to Mom. And, I'm glad Charlene brought that up. We're not anti-doctor. We love doctors. We're not anti-medical. We're not anti-medicine. It's just the doctors don't know. They've not been educated. They're miseducated when it comes to diseases like cancer or to conditions like diabetes, for instance. Doctors are, we were on an interview yesterday and Charlene said, hey, if I got my arm cut off, I wouldn't go to herbs. I'd go to the emergency room, and doctors with trauma medicine can reattach a limb.
It's amazing.
There's a distinct place for doctors in today's society. And we're honored to be among some of the brightest people in the world. Some of these doctors are amazing that with the surgeries they can do, and they can almost give you back your sight, and they do brain transplants and reattach a limb. It's amazing what trauma medicine is able to do. But with that being said, when it comes to cancer, when it comes to diabetes and other things that are more chronic,
yes, chronic illness,
they don't have a clue how to treat it.
We just encourage people to find someone that understands how to work with the whole body, whether it's diabetes, cancer, or another chronic illness that they have, to find a holistic approach, because something in the body went wrong, and that's why we're dealing with diabetes or cancer or other types of disorders in the body.
For sure. I mean, you know, I'm glad to hear you guys say this too, because we are very pro-doctor as well. We teach people doctors are not the enemy. They're altruistic. I got 5 doctors in my family. They go and do it for the right reasons, right? It's just that they're, you know, our analogy is they're like carpenters who have been given a really crappy toolbox, right? They haven't been given tools to be able to actually teach people how to use lifestyle modification to actually reverse chronic disease. It's just, it's not their fault.
Yeah. And then, you know, when it comes to diabetes or cancer, they're kind of like a mechanic that's been taught that your car will run best on milk instead of gasoline, right? They've not been taught about the proper fuel for the body so that it runs properly.
They
Exactly.
have no classes in nutrition whatsoever. And food can be some of the most powerful medicine for our body if we understand the way that it works. What is food? What is real food? What is non-food that we're putting in as if it were food? And that could be one of the many things that are killing us.
100%. You're preaching to the choir here. I love this. So, you know, you guys say this in your docuseries. Cancer is not a death sentence. You know, we say this all the time. Diabetes is not a death sentence. But oftentimes when people get diagnosed with cancer, a lot of the times they feel the necessity to have to make a decision really fast. And, you know, their doctors and their medical team can oftentimes be urging them into making a decision quickly before the cancer has a chance to continue to spread and take their life. So can you guys go into a little bit of detail here about whether it's necessary for somebody to have to make a decision real quickly, or do they actually have time when they receive a cancer diagnosis?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And that's one of the first things we try to help people to understand, that when they get that diagnosis, and we know what that's like, because when we got the diagnosis for Ty's father, the first thing we thought, because we didn't know any better, was, oh my goodness, he's going to die. Well, the surgery did kill him. And again, we thought it was a cancer. It was not. But we've learned so much since then. And so the first thing we tell people, if they get that cancer diagnosis, and our goal is to educate people before they do, so that they're armed with power and truth to make the right decision, because they have options outside of the big 3. So the first thing we tell people, if they get the diagnosis, is wait. Educate yourself. It took years for that cancer to grow in your body. It's not going to change. And if they're not feeling a lot of pain, you know, a lot of the pain people feel is a result of the chemotherapy or the treatments that they're getting that are really causing harm in their body outside of the cancer, their whole body. So wait, research. And while they research, they can make some fundamental changes that are pretty simple, such as cut out all sugar. Sugar feeds cancer. If you do that one thing, that can make a dramatic difference. And eat real food. Food that's not genetically modified or packaged or, you know, dead, but eat real food, living food, food that grows from the earth, plant-based food, raw food. Do juicing. Cleanse the body with that fresh juice every day. Detoxify the body by sweating, exercising, rebounding. There's so many things you could do, but educate yourself. There are options. There are doctors out there, clinics available, protocols that are powerful. One of the best places that they can educate themselves right now with your summit on diabetes. Learn what is this? What are the options you have before you? We've done documentaries, a Global Quest, a Truth About Cancer, Global Quest. We've written books. Find something, educate yourself, and keep learning from different sources until you feel confident to make that right choice. We've tried to make it easy with our docuseries in that we've covered every facet of health and disease, especially with cancer, but even beyond, with genetically modified foods, with all kinds of things to help people to understand that there are options available to them. So number 1, wait, educate, change the way you eat.
Yeah, and I'll add to that. That's a great answer. You know, oftentimes, if you do rush in, oftentimes the reason that doctors try to rush you into treatment is, of course, that's what they've been taught, that you need to hurry and get it treated because we're not really sure what cancer is, but it might be spreading quickly and we don't want you to die. I mean, they have good intentions, but I think there's a lot of fear that can, what do they call it, entrain? They can entrain their fear to you. You pick up that fear because they're afraid too. The doctors are afraid because they don't really know how to treat cancer. And so they're afraid for you. And so sometimes cancer patients are afraid because the doctor's really afraid, because the doctor was never taught how to adequately treat cancer when they were in medical school. And the only thing that can happen, and we're not saying that there aren't certain cancers that are very aggressive that you should make a decision on rather quickly. There are, but the majority aren't. I was doing an interview. This reminded me of an interview. It was probably 10 years ago on Coast to Coast AM. And a man called in, and I was talking to the host about the price of experimental chemotherapy. And I had mentioned that I think that some chemotherapies are $50,000 per dose. And this was back in 2010, a time period. And he called in, he said, Ty, you're actually a little bit low. My mother just went in for an experimental chemo. It was $70,000 for the first dose. And he said she went in just for a general practitioner visit. She wasn't showing any symptoms. She didn't feel bad, but they found the cancer. They told her she needed to start treatment the next week, even though she had no symptoms, and she died 2 weeks later from the chemotherapy. I mean, she literally died from the chemotherapy. And unfortunately, it's happening more and more often, guys. The treatments are killing people faster than the disease itself.
And I have to add to what you're saying, honey, with all doctors aren't, with the incentive they have, there's a big commission that they make, a markup and commission on chemotherapy drugs, radiation, that kind of thing. Now, you can't make commissions on all the drugs, but you can on those drugs. So just as an example of the corruption within the community of the medical community, there was a doctor that contacted Ty maybe close to 10 years ago. And he said, I just want you to know that I'm a radiologist at a radiology center, and I'm out, and I want you to know why. Because he was on board with everything that we were teaching. A lot of great doctors around the world, and we're partnered with a lot of them that are doing great things. But this doctor said that he was working in the ER, and somebody came in with cancer, late stage cancer, was really in bad shape. And his colleague, he said, the guy that I'm going to tell you about, he makes a lot of money.
An oncologist.
An oncologist, yes. An oncologist. It makes a lot of money. And in our hometown, I guess a 3,000 square foot house, you were considered rich. He had a 10,000 square foot home. He had all these luxuries. And he's like us, you work hard, make money, good for you. God bless you. That's great. But he said, here's how the guy's making the money. So the guy comes in with a late stage cancer, and his oncologist friend looked at him and said, we got to get radiation treatments in him right away. And he said, I looked at him and said, that will kill him. And he said, well, I don't mean to sound morbid, but unless we get 2 treatments in him, we don't get paid.
Yeah, he said,
no.
His exact statement actually was 3 treatments. He said, he's going to die anyway, but if we can't get 3 treatments in before he dies, we're not going to get paid. So
Unbelievable.
Yes.
That is
the balance of force that we're dealing with. That's what, that's a shocker, isn't it?
Wow.
At that point, he realized he was in the wrong business. And unfortunately, cancer is a business. Diabetes is a business. There's so much money being made on the perpetuation of these sicknesses and these symptoms, when most of the time they're rather easy to turn around or to live with, but we're not taught that.
Yeah, that's really, really sad. And your steps of what to do is very logical, I mean, take your time. I mean, that's just so logical, and the food and all that stuff, it's brilliant. You touched on GMO foods a little bit here. Can you go into a little more detail, give our audience some insight into the research showing GMO foods and how it's related to cancer development, and maybe what you've seen in laboratory animals being fed GMO foods?
Sure. So the study that we've probably all seen the pictures from is the Charlene study. It was a study on GMOs that was done by Charlene and his colleagues in France at the University of Caen. Now, this was 2012, 2013, I think, is when that study was released. This is after Monsanto. I do that sometimes. This is after Monsanto came out and said that GMOs are safe, right? That they were substantially equivalent to real food. And they had done the studies, right? Monsanto had done the studies, and GMOs are safe. Well, Charlene said, let's do the studies ourselves, and let's just see if they're really as safe as we're hearing. Well, they studied the rats, and they found out that after about 150 days, on GMO corn, and I think they did some soy, but mostly GMO corn, the rats began to get enormous tumors. And by the end of the 2-year study, I think 80%-ish of the females and 50%-ish, if I remember the statistics right, had cancerous tumors. The only difference between the Monsanto studies and the Charlene studies, and you can go out on the internet and you can find Charlene study debunked. It wasn't a valid study. It wasn't a valid cancer study, blah, blah, blah. The only difference was that Monsanto, they killed the study at 90 days before the rats had a chance to get tumors, and Charlene carried it out to 2 years and the rats got the tumors. Same kind of rats. There were Sprague-Dawley rats, same number in the test sample. They each used 10 rats in the studies. There's no difference in the studies. The only difference was that Charlene carried it out to 2 years and found out that, yeah, GMO corn is causing enormous tumors in these rats. That's what we know about GMOs. And GMOs go hand in hand with glyphosate, right? Glyphosate Monsanto was recently fined $289 million because they knew glyphosate caused cancer, didn't tell this poor groundskeeper out in Oakland that has non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. We know it causes cancer. World Health Organization told us in 2015 they know it causes cancer in animals, probably causes cancer in humans. How much more information, how much more proof do we need to know that we should stay away from these GMOs and these glyphosate-ridden foods?
And also, too, I want to add to the GMO equation a concern that I have as a mother. The GMOs have been shown to sterilize our people, sterilize our children. So,
by third generation.
Yeah, I think it was the second. Was it third?
I think it was third generation sterility, but it may have been
I think it might have been the second generation sterility. So we're seeing a big problem in sterility like never before. And GMOs have been out for a little while now. So it's causing the body to form an allergic reaction when the seed and the egg come together. They're fighting each other. And so that's a real problem. Our children, they're going to grow up. They're going to be like me and Ty. They're going to find their princess or the Braveheart. You're going to fall in love, get married. And then they're going to want children and not be able to have them. So that's just one of the many problems, the cancer equation, the sterility, leaky gut syndrome. Allergies are coming out of this. The body's fighting its own self with the disorders that we're seeing. It's been linked to autism. So many different terrible things. It's not even a food. It's scientists have spliced different pieces of things together. Roundup Ready corn, there's Roundup in every cell of that corn. So corn that is sprayed or vegetables that are sprayed, you could wash it off and then maybe eat it and be okay. But you've got Roundup Ready corn, and every bite, every cell in that bite is contaminated, and it's a killer. So it's hard for me to even believe that that's allowed. And in many countries it's not, but it is here, right here in the United States of America, the land of the free and the home of the brave.
Mm-hmm. Cute cat.
Oh.
She's all over the place. She loves to get on camera here. Okay, so we'll do it with her right here. So this conversation here about Monsanto and about glyphosate, I think, is really, really important because, in the world of diabetes, there's also pharmaceutical companies that create medications that have black box warnings on them. They cause acute kidney failure, but yet they're already accessible. There's millions of people around the world that are taking them. And, it's only after the fact that pharmaceutical companies go, oh, whoops, our bad, our fault, right? What blows my mind is that we're in 2018, right? 2018, 2019. We are so technologically advanced, but yet we have these large multinational companies that are running the show. I don't fully understand how they're able to do what they do. Is it literally just that they have incredibly strong defense teams and, they have a team of lawyers that nobody can take down? Is that the reason why they have the power that they have?
Yeah, that's exactly why, Cyrus. The pharma lobby is actually the biggest lobby in Washington, D.C. It's bigger than oil. So they spend more money on their lobbyists, taking out the politicians and whining and dining them and contributing to their campaigns to make sure that the legislation is big pharma friendly, it's vaccine friendly, it's glyphosate friendly. It's, can you imagine? I mean, we know that each year that drugs that are approved by the FDA and are properly taken by the recipient kill 100,000 people in the United States alone. We know that. The FDA admits it on their own website, that 100,000 people die from drugs that are properly prescribed and properly taken. That figure alone should blow your mind. Can you imagine if we had a group that was regulating natural medicine, and it was the Natural Medicine Advisory Committee, the NMA, and the NMA had approved bananas to help control blood sugar. Let's just say, we're just making this up on the spur of the moment.
Right.
And bananas were approved. And we later found out that 100,000 people a year die from bananas, but they're still legal, and it's still okay. And nobody is penalized from giving bananas to people, even though we know they're killing them. Why? Well, it's because the money that's being spent on the banana legislation in Washington, D.C. to make sure that we keep giving bananas to people that it's killing. Now, that may be a really bad example, and it'll give people an opportunity to cut and say, Ty Bollinger said bananas are killing people. That's not what I'm saying, but I'm just making a poor example. Can you imagine any natural substance that was being used that killed 100,000 people a year, and they still let it stay legal?
Just to add insult to injury, you've got pediatricians that are pushing vaccines, Big Pharma. And first of all, Big Pharma, they not only wine and dine the politicians, they're wining and dining doctors. They're sending doctors on vacation. So doctors they come in with their big pill boxes and their suitcases and say, hey, here's some drugs you can prescribe. And by the way, you know what? We're going to give you a free trip to Hawaii or whatever it is. But then you've got specifically pediatricians, if they vaccinate upwards to 69%, something like that, 60-some percent.
68%.
68% of their patients, if they're all up to date on their vaccines, they get a big fat bonus.
They get Blue Cross Blue Shield actually gives a pediatrician $400 per patient if 68% of their patients are fully vaccinated, which multiplied out, it's not uncommon for a pediatrician's office to have 1,000 patients. And if they have 68% of those kids vaccinated fully, that's $400,000 in Medicare, Blue Cross Blue Shield, bonuses they can be paid out every year.
Profit. So they're highly, and that's why there's a bully tactic that they play, the pediatricians do, and I was a recipient of that, and that's another story. But they play the bully and they intimidate mothers and fathers, and making them feel like they're a bad parent if they don't vaccinate. And these parents that have not done the research, they don't know, although their gut's telling them, no. I've talked to many of these parents, and I was one of them. Your gut tells you one thing, the doctor's telling you another. Then you do the research. Some of these mothers and fathers have lost their children due to vaccines. And it's very sad. It's very terrible. We've done the research and we see, and more people are waking up. We've got mommies of autistic children that have been vaccine damaged that are out there fighting. I've been with them on Capitol Hill in Washington, talking to the legislatures. And it's really a blessing to help to wake those people up. But most of them are asleep and they just don't know. And that's why this is so important. We need to educate people so they do know.
Absolutely. I mean, all this stuff you guys are talking about it's really outraging. I mean, this are real people's lives, and I'm studying to get earn a master's in public health right now, and I'm getting exposed to a lot of the conventional teaching and what's in the curriculum, and it's outraging. It's really upsetting. But one thing you guys focus on is the importance of a positive outlook. So I want to switch topics and hear some of your guys' thoughts on the importance of laughter and how that can play in the role of chronic disease.
But cheerful heart is good medicine, right?
Yeah. Cheerful heart's good medicine. We did a documentary called The Truth About Pet Cancer. I don't know if you guys saw that, but one of the veterinarians, I was going to say, what do you call those doctors that work on pets? One of the veterinarians that I interviewed out in LA, he referred to a study that they've done on laughter being extremely powerful to boost the immune function. Because the immune function is what keeps us well. It's what eventually fends off cancer. It's what we have to be. We have to have a strong immune function to live. And they've done studies on people where they've shown them a slapstick humorous film. They're laughing, just belly laughing. And then at that exact point, they can draw the blood, put it in a petri dish, and they can see that the natural killer cells, the T cells, the B cells, the immune function is at high alert. They're digesting bacteria. They're ready to defend. And they've taken the same group of people and made them watch a very sad movie with just a heart-wrenching ending, draw the blood out of those same people, put it in a petri dish, and it's like the immune system's not even functioning. Nothing is happening. So we know from studies like that, we can measure the immune function and the increase in the immune function that happens when we do laugh. I recently went to Asia for our next documentary that we'll release next April called Eastern Medicine Journey Through Asia. We went to 7 countries in 7 days. And across the board, those physicians in Asia, they have laughter therapy for their patients. They literally that's part of their treatment is they laugh every day is part of the way that they heal is through laughter.
I love that. I want one of those doctors on my side. That's genius. Now, in another interview, I actually heard that of these Chinese doctors that you interviewed recently, they told you guys, and correct me if I'm wrong, that every case of cancer in particular was directly related to some element of anger or resentment, and that the Chinese doctors, they know this, and that can subsequently manifest itself into a chronic disease, whether it's cancer or something else. So can you tell us a little bit more about what you guys learned?
Yeah, that's one thing that Ty came home and shared with me, that we've talked to so many doctors, we've done so much research, and we've done it for years. And so it was encouraging to me to hear Ty say that there was something new, really big that he learned in Asia, that the doctors, they're treating the patients, as he's saying, with the holistic approach, the whole person from head to toe, physically, but not only physically, spiritually, in their minds and their thoughts and their feelings. And yes, he said across the board, every doctor said that every case of cancer they've dealt with, there is a spiritual element that we know the spirit and the body are connected. Mm-hmm. And so there's an element in the spirit when someone's dealing with, maybe it's a business relationship that went bad that caused bitterness. There's a root of bitterness there, or there's extreme anger, or there's fear. And we know there's a lot of people that are fearful with cancer. Like Ty said earlier, the doctors are instilling the fear, oh, you're going to die, and they're afraid, and then they go and they die because they're living out of that intense fear. So these negative emotions eventually manifest themselves through different types of imbalances and disorders in the body, one of which is cancer. And a lot of the time, if they can deal with those emotions and replace the negative emotion with something healthy and strong and beautiful and good, forgive. If there's a problem in your life and you're living with an unforgiving spirit that has created such a root of bitterness, it literally is manifesting itself physically. Deal with each thought you have, and it's like cleansing and detoxing your mind. The people that you're bitter toward, unforgiving toward, forgive them, not because they're worthy, but for your own health and for your life. And it might nourish the relationship too, and it might transform somebody else's life around you. Because think about people that are bitter, they're unhappy, and that's manifesting in their relationships as well as their body. So that was a tremendous eye-opener for us, that those doctors in Asia are dealing with the spirit just as well as the physical part of the person. And they're married, they can't be separated, that those two are one. And that is really a big different way that they're dealing with the whole person and the cancer equation, and they're being successful in that type of treatment. We're seeing great success.
You don't see a lot of clinics here in the United States that have any kind of a department where they talk to cancer patients about who are you resentful towards? What about do you have anger issues? Are you bitter towards someone? Because in Chinese medicine, they believe that different types of cancers manifest because of different negative emotions, and so it's this holistic approach. In the Philippines, they have it's like a poem. I think they call it Ho'oponopono. I believe it's a Hawaiian name, but what it is the cancer patient says, I forgive you, I love you, I don't hold anything against you. It's just like literally saying to whoever they're bitter towards, I'm letting it go, because being bitter is like drinking poison and expecting it to hurt somebody else. It doesn't hurt them, it just hurts you. And so that's really important across the board that we saw in Asia.
Yeah, I'm really glad to hear you guys talking about that, because sort of the emotional and non-physical stuff, it's not talked about enough. So I'm really glad to hear you guys covering that. But we still have some more questions on the physical topic. So you guys talk about the importance of sweating. So can you talk to us a little bit about sauna treatment and how that can benefit people with cancer?
Sure. Cancer typically results from being nutritionally deficient and overly toxic. And that's one of the best ways that you can detoxify your body. Some people think of detoxification, you think, oh, I got to do this whole body detox where I clear the kidneys and the colon and the gall. And you need to do that as well. But just a simple way that you can detox each day is through sweating. Almost every night I lay in a sauna and sweat just for 45 minutes, just sweat like a pig. And it feels awesome. I literally feel great when I get out of there. And metabolically, it actually stimulates your metabolism like you're exercising. I typically do it after I work out with weights. So it's a great addition. Anybody can do it. They've got the little personal saunas now that are very affordable that you can sit in, and your head's out, it zips around your head, so you can breathe cool air, but your body still gets heated up and you sweat and you detoxify. Your skin is one of your primary detox organs, but people don't think of it as that. So that's something that you should be trying to do every day, is sweating. And unfortunately, today we live in a lifestyle situation where most people don't sweat much. Our grandparents, if they looked at the way that we work, they would just be flabbergasted. They would say something like, "You mean you sit for 10 hours and you click with one hand and you move your fingers and you call that work?" It's not what they called work, going out and working the field and sweating and picking their own vegetables and, milking the cow or whatever they did. So we need to be sure that we exercise and sweat every day.
A whole different ballgame. So the next question for you was, does it matter if sweating happens as a result of being in a sauna or whether you're exercising? It sounds to me like both of them, exercise will also get you to sweat, which is beneficial. But then on top of that, there's 1,000 other reasons why exercise is beneficial. So can you guys maybe talk a little bit about the benefits of exercise for those living with cancer?
Exercising is really important, as well as sweating. Sweating there are toxins trapped inside of your body that can only come out by sweating. Infrared sauna really superheats the body to a temperature where cancer cells cannot live in a high heat environment. Regular cells are fine, but cancer cells, you can literally just destroy them with that high heat. And also pulling out through the sweat heavy metals. Heavy metals get stuck in your body. So sweating at high temperatures will pull out that metal that you have toxicity in your body. We have talked to mothers of autistic children who put their children, they're healing, into a sauna, and they would literally have to wipe down every 5 minutes that sweat, because if the sweat dries, the metals go back into your system. So you're sweating out a lot of those toxins that you need to clear your body of to heal your body. But exercising, specifically rebounding is so important for the cancer patient as well as all of us, because our lymphatic system is a draining system, a detoxification system in our body, and we don't have a pump like our blood is pumped by the heart. But the lymphatic system, we have to move in order for this. That's why Ty's saying, if you're sitting at a desk for 10 hours, you're not moving. You've got to get moving. So jumping up and down is a special movement that helps to move that lymphatic fluid and detoxify the body. So it's really great to, I like to, and I've been working really hard lately, so I haven't been doing this as much as I would like, but I like to rebound first for at least 10 minutes. 20 minutes is better, but whatever you can do, and then get into the infrared sauna. Like Ty, when I do that combination for me, I get out thinking, wow, I feel like a new person. That's how much better I feel when I do both of those together.
For sure. Yeah. Dr. Greger from Nutrition Facts, I don't know if you guys are familiar with him, but he recently released a video about the beneficial effects of going into a sauna for removing lead from your body. And so, I think this is like a time-tested and proven strategy that we've known about for potentially even thousands of years. And
sure. If you look at the Native Americans, right, with their sweat teepees, they've known the benefit of sweating for thousands of years. It's almost like sometimes we have to catch up to the medical profession has to catch up to the times.
Right, but the funny thing is that in today's world, a lot of researchers, a lot of doctors, they say, show me the evidence. Where's the paper? Where's the randomized clinical control trial? Where's the research that actually shows this? And a lot of times the answer is there is no research. It hasn't been done. There's no money that's going into this, but yet that doesn't mean that these time-tested and proven strategies aren't dramatically effective. And sometimes it almost might sound weird talking about it in the presence of somebody who's looking for evidence all the time, but the truth is the truth.
Well, the reality is some things are self-evident. And I mean, if you see thousands of people that have done a certain thing and they've gotten better, there may not be a double-blind placebo-controlled study to prove that, but a couple thousand people all did the same thing and it helped with whatever condition. That's enough for the person that's not a medical doctor looking for a double-blind placebo. To my knowledge, they've never had a double-blind placebo-controlled study to prove that you have to breathe in order to live, because that would have necessitated that the others didn't get the air and they suffocated. That study's never been done, but I guarantee you what, you got to breathe to live, but there's no study that says that.
Water's wet, and if you go underwater for too long, you do drown. I'm not sure if there's a study that proves those things, but it's that concept. It's self-evident.
Exactly. And speaking of the evidence, when it comes to the connection between diabetes and cancer, again, for the audience that we have, mainly living with pre-diabetes and type 2 diabetes, the connection between the two conditions is actually, it's fascinating. And, it goes a little something like this. You eat a diet that makes you insulin resistant for any number of reasons, right? So you develop insulin resistance in your muscle, you develop in your adipose tissue and inside of your liver. And then those peripheral tissues become inflamed over the course of time. And because they're resistant to the effects of insulin, the pancreas kicks in and says, oh, wait a minute, I can solve that problem. Let me make more insulin. So it does. And over the course of time, your blood insulin level goes up and you become hyperinsulinic. Now, it turns out that cancer cells, once they start being created in sufficient numbers as a result of having inflammation present in tissues, those cancer cells actually, they have an insulin receptor, which is slightly different than a traditional insulin receptor. So they have an insulin receptor B form as opposed to an insulin receptor A form. And when that happens, then any amount of insulin can actually significantly accelerate the rate of growth of the cancer. And so a lot of the times, people living with diabetes who become hyperinsulinemic over the course of time end up at a much advanced risk for the development of cancer, simply because insulin is literally feeding the cancer. And one thing that we've heard you guys talk about in the past is this thing called IPTLD chemotherapy, insulin potentiated targeted low dose therapy. Can you guys go into a little bit of detail about what exactly that is and why it's important for people to understand that?
Yeah, IPTLD is a good choice for somebody that wants to use a little bit of chemo, that wants to, sometimes, your family's pushing you. Do the chemo, but you don't want to have the side effects. IPTLD is a good option because the name stands for, the acronym, insulin potentiated low dose targeted chemo. The dosage of chemotherapy is much lower. It's about 1/10 of your typical dose. Insulin is used to trick the cells into gobbling up the chemo. Insulin is used to force sugar into the cells, but when you become insulin resistant, it doesn't work. Your body produces more insulin, then there's more sugar. It's this endless cycle, right? And there's more sugar in the blood, and then there's more insulin. And one of the things that you mentioned, being insulin resistant, one of the things that can cause that is obesity, because the fat cells can release cytokines. Cytokines cause the inflammation, which can result in being insulin resistant. So it's this endless cycle. But one of the things that insulin does do is it will cause the cell to open up to eat the sugar. But you trick the cell, and instead of sugar, you give it chemo. You mix the insulin in with the chemo, and so the cancer cells, which have more insulin receptors than your normal cell, they gobble up the chemo. Your normal cells don't. It kills the cancer. You don't have the side effects. You don't have the vomiting, the nausea, the loss of hair, the feeling like you wish you were dead when you went through the treatment. So it's a treatment that we included in our first edition of Cancer Step Outside the Box. It's a treatment that we still stand by for somebody that wants to use low doses of chemo. And there are several clinics across the country, from the Cosanis Clinic in Dallas, Texas, to Dr. Forsyth's clinic out in Nevada. He's a pro at IPTLD. It's a very effective treatment, low-dose chemo without the side effects. And insulin is basically the Trojan horse.
It's great. It's great. Okay, so before we go, we'd love to have you guys give our audience some tips. What can you tell them to do to decrease their risk to get cancer in the future?
Well, I'll give you some tips that can be used for both cancer and diabetes. So there are lots of natural substances that God has put here on this earth that if we ingest them, it helps lower our cancer risk, and it could even help to reverse diabetes. So a few of those things that help with both are resveratrol, which we can find in the skin of grapes. Fantastic for cancer prevention, also great at reversing diabetes. Green tea is something that's been shown to be great for both conditions. Ginseng, something that's been shown to be great for both conditions. Chromium GTF, chromium glucose tolerance factor, fantastic at both conditions. There's actually a drug called metformin. We don't usually push drugs, but it's a very low toxicity drug called metformin that's been shown to be effective at both cancer and diabetes. That's just a few of the natural substances that we have. I think the key is, and we were on an interview yesterday. We've been doing a lot of interviews together, so they're all kind of running together. But I think the key that we need to all focus on is this. Let's quit worrying so much about naming whatever condition we have and then fighting that condition. Let's focus more on providing the body with the fuel that it needs and detoxifying the body. And I mean, heck, if you do that and you juice for 30 days, maybe you're pre-diabetic, maybe you have some sort of early stage cancer, you juice for 30 or 60 days on organic juice, both those conditions might just go away. Who knows?
Yeah, so yeah, we encourage people, again, just to educate themselves, take their time. While they're doing that, just cut the sugar, cut it all out, cut processed food, carbohydrates that are processed, that kind of thing. Cut it all out, eat real food, juice if you can, and drink lots of good water, exercise your mind, cleanse your mind, to turn from negative to positive in both your mind and in your diet, your exercise. Take time to take care of yourself. And if you take care of yourself, then you can then take care of others. Mm-hmm. But there's just those fundamental principles: eating real food, drinking real water, and clean water. There's a story I want to share with you. The juice lady, Sherry Khambatta, shared this with me. So I just want to give hope to those viewers of yours. This was one of the most phenomenal testimonies of someone being cured or healed of cancer. So she went through the conventional machine, did chemotherapy and all these other therapies that people do. And she spent all of her money, and she was riddled with tumors from head to toe. The doctor said, there's nothing left we can do, go home and die, basically. And so she went to Sherry and said, Sherry, I'm just out of hope, out of answers, and out of money. I have nothing, and I've got tumors from head to toe. Can you help me? And she said, yes, I can. Are you willing to juice your way back to health? And she said, I'll try it. So Sherry just helped her by juicing, and she said it was an inexpensive way to heal the body. It didn't cost a lot of money compared to other treatments that you may think about. So she started just juicing. She was very diligent. You have to be determined. She was very diligent, did the juicing, drank only juice, and within a matter of weeks, literally, I think maybe under 2 weeks, I don't remember the time frame, but she experienced this sensation in her throat where there was a ripping. And the ripping went down through her throat, down her abdomen, and she literally expelled a tumor that had tubes attached to it. So it's probably on the inside of her throat. It went down through her system and out her digestive system as a whole tumor. And she said eventually the tumors broke up within her body to where she was cancer-free. And that was with juicing alone. So as people do their research and just stick to something like that, they might heal themselves without choosing official protocols, you know. So that's a tremendous story. Sherry called the phytonutrients in the juice heavenly scissors, where they literally cut the blood supply to the tumor, the cancerous tumor, and kill it, cut it off from the body.
Wow, it's amazing, actually, just the visual of that. You know, you hear about people becoming cancer-free, but you don't really hear about a tumor ending up in your digestive system, which you then poop out and then take a look at and go, oh, look what I just got rid of. You know, but I think what you guys said earlier is actually very apropos, which is that it's not the simpler your process or the simpler your treatment method, the more effective it is likely to be, right? This is not that complicated. In fact, it's like, it doesn't need to be complicated, because the more complicated it becomes, oftentimes the more confusing and the less effective it is. Eat real food, drink clean water, move your body, have a sense of purpose, surround yourself with good people. It's really not that hard. And we see this a lot from the people that we interview here in the diabetes world. But I'm glad to hear that, you know, you guys are reiterating the same message, because this message is not specific to diabetes. It's not specific to cancer. It's not specific to an autoimmune disease. This is a general human strategy which seems to work out brilliantly. And in the world in which we live in today, oftentimes we can kind of get sidetracked from that simplicity path. And before you know it, you're on a path to a much more, you know, a higher risk for chronic disease. But getting back on that path seems to work out in the majority of all cases.
Yeah, have to agree with you there. It's a lot of times the more complicated path doesn't work as well. A lot of times the simple path is staring you right in the face.
Absolutely. No question about it. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us today, guys. We really appreciate it. You know, for those of you, for the audience members who are watching this, if you guys have not seen The Truth About Cancer, even if cancer is not something that you're currently dealing with right now, it's still a phenomenal series in which you learn a lot about the pharmaceutical industry. You learn a lot about the traditional model of care. You learn a lot about what can be done for cancer, and a lot of that message translates over to diabetes and beyond. So if you guys haven't seen that, please do take a look at it. And thank you again for all your time. You guys, you're, you know, continuing the numbers that I see when you guys, you know, promote a brand new docuseries or a new book. It's like millions upon millions upon millions of people around the world. I love to be surrounded by people like that, and I really appreciate all the dedication that you guys put to truly helping people out and delivering a message which truly works.
Thank you, Cyrus.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Robbie. We appreciate it.